David Bowie was never just a musician. He was a cultural icon who reinvented himself again and again, breaking boundaries and defying expectations. From Ziggy Stardust to the Thin White Duke, Bowie's career spanned decades and genres, inspiring millions with his bold creativity. To fans, he often seemed untouchable, an artist above petty rivalries or grudges. But behind the glam, the fame, and the endless reinventions, Bowie was still human. And like every artist navigating the complex world of music, he had strong opinions, including about other musicians. For most of his life, Bowie was admired for his generosity and open-mindedness. Yet, even he admitted there were certain figures in the industry he could not stand. Over time, stories emerged of sharp comments, subtle dismissals, and moments where Bowie made his feelings crystal clear. These weren't casual dislikes. They were rooted in personal clashes, creative disagreements, or simply the arrogance he refused to tolerate. When word spread about the 6 musicians Bowie openly admitted he hated, fans were stunned. The names weren't obscure. Some were household legends, others rising stars at the time. Each carried a history with Bowie, moments of tension that left lasting impressions. While Bowie rarely spoke out harshly, when he did, it revealed a side of him few had seen, candid, unapologetic, and brutally honest. So who were the 6 musicians that David Bowie said he hated the most? And what exactly happened between them and one of the most inventive artists of all time? The answers reveal not only Bowie's sharp perspective on the music world, but also the challenges of surviving decades in an industry built on ego, rivalry, and reinvention. When David Bowie spoke about the musicians he disliked most, the world paid attention. Known for his eloquence and intelligence, Bowie rarely wasted words. If he expressed distaste for someone, it wasn't without reason. The 6 musicians he admitted to hating weren't chosen at random. They represented specific encounters, rivalries, and clashes that left a mark on him. The first name on Bowie's list was tied to the glam rock explosion of the early 1970s, the very movement that helped make him a star. While Bowie's Ziggy Stardust era defined a generation, he also found himself surrounded by artists who, in his view, copied his style without bringing originality of their own. One particular glam frontman frustrated Bowie, who felt his music was shallow and overly derivative. To Bowie, imitation without substance was the greatest sin an artist could commit. His comments on this figure revealed his deep frustration with musicians who borrowed heavily from his aesthetic while failing to innovate. Another musician on Bowie's list came from the punk scene. While Bowie appreciated the energy and rebellion of punk, he dismissed certain figures as hostile and self-destructive rather than visionary. One punk frontman, notorious for his chaotic behavior, represented everything Bowie despised: arrogance without artistry, aggression without purpose. Bowie respected risk-taking but demanded creativity. In his eyes, this punk icon crossed the line from rebellion into recklessness, which he could not respect. The third clash was more personal. Bowie's relationship with one American rock star began cordially, but soured after a series of public comments. Bowie accused the musician of being dismissive toward British artists and overly consumed with self-image. The tension escalated in interviews where Bowie didn't hide his distaste. It was a rare moment where he broke from his usual restraint, letting the world see that even he could be provoked into sharp criticism. In each of these examples, Bowie's reasoning followed a pattern. He didn't hate people simply for being different. He hated them for failing to respect the craft, for leaning on ego instead of talent, or for mistreating others in the industry. He saw music as more than entertainment. It was an art form that demanded integrity. Anyone who disrespected that, in Bowie's eyes, was undeserving of admiration. The revelation of these first 3 names sent shockwaves through the fan community. People weren't used to hearing Bowie speak so bluntly. For years, he had been regarded as a figure of tolerance, someone who embraced diversity and celebrated difference. Yet, this honesty showed that even a legend had limits. Bowie's dislikes revealed his standards: a refusal to tolerate arrogance, disrespect, or laziness in an industry that often rewarded those very traits. More than simple grudges, Bowie's dislikes highlighted his vision of what music should be: To him, artistry required reinvention, honesty, and boldness. Anything less, whether it came from copycats, punks without purpose, or egotistical stars, was something he had no patience for. By naming these figures, Bowie wasn't just venting. He was sending a message about the values that guided his career and why he remained a singular voice in a world of noise. As the list of musicians Bowie disliked unfolded, it became clearer that his feelings weren't simply about rivalry, but about clashing values. The fourth musician on his list was one who had achieved massive mainstream success in the 1980s. To the public, this artist represented pop perfection, slick production, catchy hooks, and chart dominance. But to Bowie, the music lacked heart. He once remarked in an interview that this artist's songs felt manufactured, designed more for sales than for substance. Bowie despised the idea of creating music solely as a product, and this figure, to him, embodied the commercialization of art. What particularly irked Bowie was how this pop superstar was often celebrated as a musical visionary by the press. Bowie, who spent his career reinventing himself at great personal risk, couldn't stand seeing someone praised for playing it safe. He believed that true art involved vulnerability, experimentation, and the willingness to fail. This pop artist, in Bowie's eyes, never took that leap. The hatred stemmed less from personal animosity and more from Bowie's frustration with what he felt was the lowering of artistic standards. The fifth name was more personal. This musician, a fellow British rock star, had been part of Bowie's social circle in the 1970s. At first, they shared wild nights, collaborations, and even mutual admiration. But over time, Bowie came to see this figure as toxic. Excessive partying, reckless behavior, and constant drama soured their friendship. Bowie, who had struggled with his own demons during that era, eventually grew to resent this companion for dragging him back towards self-destructive habits. He later described the relationship as one of the most poisonous of his life. What began as camaraderie dissolved into bitter dislike, leaving scars that never truly healed. The sixth and final name was the most controversial. This musician was widely respected, even revered in the industry. Many fans were stunned when Bowie admitted his distaste, yet his reasons were consistent with his principles. He accused this artist of being manipulative, of using charm and influence to control the industry rather than letting the art speak for itself. For Bowie, the music business was already cutthroat enough. Seeing a fellow musician exploit it for power rather than creativity was intolerable. He viewed this person as a symbol of corruption in an industry that should have been about innovation and expression. These six names, while shocking to fans, offered a window into Bowie's uncompromising standards. He hated not just individuals, but what they represented: imitation, arrogance, superficiality, toxicity, and manipulation. Each one, in their own way, stood against the ideals Bowie cherished most. And though he rarely expressed hate openly, when he did, it was sharp, unapologetic, and deeply revealing. What's remarkable is how Bowie's dislikes contrasted with his collaborations. He worked with artists across genres, from Queen to Trent Reznor, from Bing Crosby to Iggy Pop, proving he could embrace differences when they were rooted in authenticity. It wasn't style, genre, or personality that determined his admiration or disdain. It was whether or not he believed the artistry was real. That distinction is what made his list of hated musicians so powerful and so shocking. By the time these revelations surfaced, fans were left both fascinated and unsettled. Bowie wasn't simply airing grudges, he was laying bare his philosophy of music. To him, the greatest crime wasn't being untalented or unfashionable. It was betraying the spirit of creation itself. When David Bowie revealed the names of the musicians he truly hated, it wasn't just a list. It was a declaration of what he believed music should and shouldn't be. The backlash was immediate. Fans and critics alike debated whether Bowie was being brutally honest or unnecessarily harsh. For decades, Bowie had been admired for his ability to reinvent himself without tearing others down, so his blunt honesty shocked many. But those closest to him knew that when Bowie spoke critically, it came from a place of deep reflection. He didn't waste words on petty rivalries. His opinions were rooted in his lifelong commitment to artistic integrity. Some argued that Bowie's public disdain was unfair, claiming that every artist has the right to pursue their own vision, even if it doesn't align with Bowie's ideals. Yet Bowie saw it differently. He believed musicians held a responsibility not only to entertain, but to challenge, inspire, and evolve. In his eyes, those he criticized had failed that responsibility. For Bowie, mediocrity wasn't just disappointing, it was dangerous because it dulled the cultural landscape. He felt that audiences deserved more than recycled formulas or hollow shock value. His stance was especially bold considering the risks. Criticizing well-loved or powerful figures in the industry could easily backfire. But Bowie never seemed afraid of consequences. He had built his career by taking risks, whether through his music, his personas, or his artistic choices. Speaking his mind about peers was simply another form of rebellion, a refusal to stay silent when he saw what he believed was artistic dishonesty. Interestingly, Bowie's dislikes also reflected his personal struggles. During his darker periods, he was surrounded by excess, manipulation, and ego-driven chaos. Those experiences left him with little tolerance for people who embodied those traits. In many ways, his hatred was not just about them, but about the painful reminders they triggered. To distance himself from certain musicians was also to distance himself from the parts of his past he most regretted. His sharp words, then, can be seen as a form of self-preservation, a declaration that he would no longer tolerate the things that once threatened to destroy him. The industry reaction was mixed. Some musicians privately agreed with Bowie's critiques, but lacked the courage to say it publicly. Others were furious, believing Bowie had crossed a line by attacking fellow artists. Yet even his detractors admitted that Bowie's criticisms came from a place of authenticity. He wasn't seeking attention. He already had it. He wasn't trying to elevate himself. His legacy was secure. Instead, he was fighting for something he believed in, the soul of music. Fans, meanwhile, were left re-evaluating Bowie himself. They had always seen him as a boundary breaker, someone who lived beyond labels of good and bad, liked and disliked. Hearing him take such firm stances humanized him, reminding the world that even icons have strong personal opinions. For some, it made him even more relatable. For others, it raised uncomfortable questions about their own favorite musicians. Were they truly authentic, or were they among those Bowie would have despised? Through all the debates, one truth remained. Bowie's words carried weight because of who he was. He wasn't just another critic. He was a visionary who had reshaped music and culture time and again. When someone of his stature declared hatred for certain figures, it couldn't be brushed aside. It forced people to think about what they valued in art, what they celebrated, and what they were willing to overlook. By the time Bowie's list of hated musicians became widely known, it had already stirred countless debates. But looking back, what makes the story so striking is not just the names themselves, but what they represented in Bowie's worldview. He was never a man who hated lightly. His dislikes weren't casual insults tossed in interviews for shock value. They were rooted in decades of experience, in his relentless pursuit of authenticity, and in his personal philosophy that art must always aim higher. Bowie's career was a constant act of reinvention. Ziggy Stardust, the Thin White Duke, the Berlin Years, his electronic experiments, right up to Black Star. At each stage, he risked alienating fans, critics, and even his own record label. Yet he believed that risk was necessary. For him, the worst thing an artist could do was settle. And that was the common thread tying together the 6 musicians he despised. They represented complacency, arrogance, imitation, or manipulation. They chose the easy path, and that, to Bowie, was unforgivable. Over time, these revelations became less about the individuals and more about the lesson they carried. Bowie's hate was not petty. It was a warning. He was telling the world that music matters, that culture matters, and that those who exploit it without respect do real damage. His disdain became a kind of manifesto, a reminder that even in an industry built on money and fame, there were still higher ideals worth defending. For fans, this honesty reshaped how they viewed Bowie himself. Many admired him not only as a performer, but as someone unafraid to speak truths that others avoided. It gave his artistry new weight. His music was already layered with symbolism, but his words revealed the man behind the personas, a man with strong convictions, who could love as fiercely as he could hate. Critics, too, eventually came to see these remarks in a broader context. Bowie wasn't trying to diminish others just to stand taller. He was already secure in his legacy. Instead, he was using his platform to highlight the values that had guided him his entire life: originality, honesty, and transformation. By calling out those who lacked these qualities, he was setting a standard, one that younger artists could look to as both inspiration and challenge. In the end, the story of Bowie's 6 hated musicians isn't really about rivalry or bitterness. It's about a visionary who demanded more from his peers, his industry, and himself. His words forced us to confront uncomfortable truths about what we celebrate in music. Do we value artistry or do we reward imitation? Do we champion originality or do we fall for empty spectacle? Bowie's hatred, though shocking, was in fact an extension of his love. Love for art, for creativity, and for the transformative power of music. When Bowie passed away in 2016, the world mourned not only a star but a thinker, a rebel, and a teacher. His revelations about those he despised may seem harsh, but they are also part of his legacy. They remind us that greatness requires standards, that true art cannot be built on shortcuts, and that even the brightest lights cast shadows. In the end, Bowie's dislikes tell us as much about him as his loves. They reveal a man unwilling to compromise, a man who demanded that music be more than noise, that it be truth.